Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedlie, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so happy and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends and your kids' teachers about the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Stitcher Radio, Ghana, Himalaya, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Laurel Solorzano. She is here to celebrate the land of fake believe. Before we invite Laurel into the studio, we want to invite all of the authors listening to the podcast to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. You can learn how you can be a guest here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And in a long-form conversation, tell the world all about your fantastic book. Tell them about your inspiration, the goals that you have for your writing for a series. It's really a lot of fun. It's very, very easy, and it doesn't cost you a thing. You can also find out how you can submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel. If they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read, letting families know that your book is worthy of a place in their family library. Oh, and you absolutely want to find out about our monthly promotion program. We can celebrate your book through commercials here in the podcast, messages to our 100,000 plus social media followers, display your book on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards, and also have your book on display in whatever live event we are taking part in a given month. In September of 2022, we'll be at the PTO Today Expo in St. Louis, Missouri. And in October, we'll be at the Orange County Children's Book Festival in California, the largest children's book festival in North America. Learn all about these opportunities and more by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and clicking that Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Join us right now from the beautiful state of North Carolina. Our guest is here today to celebrate the publication of her debut middle grade novel. It's called The Land of Fake Believe. Please welcome to the show the very real Laurel Solorzano. Hey, Laurel, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really glad to have you on The Land of Fake Believe. What a great title.
Thank you. I actually am not very good at coming up with the titles. It's usually my friend that helps me with that.
Well, I mean, especially now that we're coming out on the other side of COVID, and I feel like I've been living in the land of fake belief for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I can understand that.
So tell us about this novel, please.
Okay. So it's set in an amusement park, and the amusement parks are called the Happily Ever After Park. And basically what happens is a family goes on vacation there, and we have the 2 older siblings, Talon and Colby, and they start teasing their 5-year-old sister Judy about how these princesses, these characters are not real. And of course, Mom gets them in trouble, and they decide to prove that these characters are not real. And as they go around trying to get video footage, maybe taking the costume or the fake wolf head or something like that, they realize that these are real ever afters. And so then begins their adventure of trying to help the good ever afters fight those evil ones in the parks.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun.
It was certainly a lot of fun to write, honestly.
I bet. Was there something in particular that inspired this book?
Well, I've always loved the typical fairy tales growing up, especially the Grimm versions, the Grimm brother versions, because they have kind of a different twist from what we see on TV or what we maybe read in picture books as children. So I liked the idea of getting to play with those characters and those worlds and stories and give them some twists that maybe even the Grimm brothers didn't think of.
I have to tell you, I need to ask you first, what was your reaction when you first read the original Grimm brothers fairy tales?
Well, I've always been the type of person who avoids what I would consider gross. So the Grimm brothers stories threw me for a loop at first. What is going on? Cinderella cut off her toes to fit them into the shoe, So it did kind of gross me out, but I thought, well, this is so interesting. Something that I thought was a very clean, maybe romantic story is actually, got some dark things going on in it. So even though I didn't like it at first, then I began to like them.
Yeah. Yeah. The first time I read them, in the original translations, I was horrified. It was like, I was also, I think, in high school. So I was horrified, but then it was like fun. And I'm like, yeah, and my thing was introducing him to others. And it's like, hey, you want to read the original stuff? And really, watching their reactions to it and being grossed out. Excuse me. That being said, I would definitely encourage families to check out the original versions of those fairy tales. Maybe read them first before you share them and read them with your kids.
Yes, for sure. My favorite fairy tale character growing up was always the Little Mermaid. And in the original version, when she gets her legs, it says that she is experiencing like she's walking on knives every time she's walking. And that was something that you don't think of when she's exploring this new world. So I took parts of those Grimm brothers stories and I've added them into my stories. So there is a character that's like the Little Mermaid and she's always in pain when she's walking. So just little things like that.
What do you think, as we're talking about your book and as we're talking about the original Grimm brothers, what kind of conversations do you think families could have if they chose to read your book together or read those original fairy tales together?
I think that certainly the original fairy tales bring about a focus on consequences that, the fun, lighter versions don't focus on. When you make a choice, there is a serious consequence. And my stories also focus on, if you use magic, there's going to be some sort of price to pay for that, some sort of consequence, not necessarily terrible, but just something to consider when you are choosing to use magic rather than just using, your God-given abilities and to fight the evil ever afters.
Interesting. I think that is a great lesson. Just the whole idea of making kids aware that all of our choices come with consequences. And I think people hear that word consequences as always being terrible and a negative. It's not necessary. It means, when you take an action, when you make a choice, when you do something else is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very realistic lesson to learn, honestly.
Yeah. One of the things that you shared with me in your pitch to come on the podcast is that you read a lot to your younger sister.
Yes, I did. All the time.
Yeah. What was that like, and what kind of how did that help your relationship with your sister grow?
Sure. So my sister and I are 7 years apart, and we didn't have a lot of common interests growing up just because partly the age gap, but just for different people. But she knew that I loved to read. So she could pretty much guarantee, Sissy, will you read with me? I would pretty much always say yes, just because I love to read. And so we read through so many books, through probably when she was maybe 6 and I was 13 up until I graduated and left the house. We were always reading something. And honestly, it was a great way for us to bond because she would listen to the stories, and sometimes she would, maybe clean the room while she was listening, or a picture or something. And, but then we had this bonded experience of, well, we're going to talk about what's going to happen to Christy next, or what happened to this character. So I very much believe that The Land of Fake Believe is a fun story that parents can enjoy with their kids. Mm-hmm. It has kind of some humor in it. And then, it has the fun characters that adults and children love. So it's definitely a good book for a wide variety of ages.
Yeah, it definitely sounds, it sounds like a fun book that a parent and a tween could switch off and each one read a page or a chapter and kind of go back and forth like that. Yeah,
definitely a lot of different ways to enjoy it. And I did all of them with my sister just because of our age gap. Sometimes she would read to me, and, I'd help her with her pronunciation. And so, yeah, that's definitely a way you could use it.
Yeah. Now, I noted on your website, I mentioned that this is your debut middle grade novel, but you've written YA titles. Why did you make the choice to switch up and write a book for this particular audience?
Sure. So YA was always where I saw myself writing, just because there are so many beloved YA books that even now as an adult, I still go back and I'll read them and enjoy them. But when I thought of this idea, I just pictured my family. There's 4 kids and there's only 3 in the family in the book. But I would see the way that they tease their little sister as kind of the way that we teased my little sister when she was that age. And I just saw it as something that more kids 8 to 11, 12 years old would enjoy, rather than maybe an 18-year-old picking it up and identifying with the younger characters.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Was this challenging for you, switching up and writing for a younger audience?
That's a great question. So I have taught all ages, honestly. I've taught year-olds up until high school students. So I have a lot of experience interacting with kids who would be the age to read this book. So talking with them, learning what they enjoy in books, what they like to read about, hearing some of their lingo and the way that they speak with each other. That was also some inspiration for my characters. So honestly, it wasn't too difficult. I just enter into the mind of the character and try to see the world through their eyes.
Yeah. You just shared with us that you've been teaching, and I know you and I spoke that now you teach online kids around the world and here in the United States. Most kids experience learning online for the first time during the pandemic, and I don't think it was a great experience for a lot of kids. For some kids, it was really a wonderful experience. I was sharing with Laurel that, my wife was taught and was kind of thrown into that whole mix of teaching virtually without really any help. That it was just like, okay, you were teaching in the classroom today. Here's a laptop. Here's a Chromebook. Teach your kids tomorrow, but through the computer. And that doesn't work. Can you talk a little bit about your experience teaching kids virtually, and if something like the pandemic, God forbid, ever happens again, how can we kind of continue education in a more successful way?
Sure. So a lot of my experience teaching has been one-on-one, and honestly, I've been teaching online almost as long as I've been teaching in person. So for me, it wasn't as much to change style because I already had experience. So I taught ESL online starting in 2017, and I started teaching in person in 2016. So it was really, I did a little bit of both. As far as making it a positive experience for everyone, that's a really hard thing to do in person anyway, because you have learners that are so different in all different styles. So I applaud any teacher that can take a classroom of 30 students and be able to keep each one engaged, because every child is so different. Mm-hmm. So honestly, I don't have a great piece of advice or wisdom as far as teaching online. It's just, it's kind of you learn as you go, similar to teaching in person. There's a lot that I know 6 years ago when I started teaching.
It's interesting that you said that, and I'm really happy that you reminded us that every kid is different and learns differently. And maybe the key to it is figuring out a way where teachers can teach to the individuals instead of expecting them to get up and to engage a room of 20 or 30 or 40 kids all together. Figure out a way to let them access the information on their own, and then come together individually or in a group of 2 or 3, and then kind of figure out, hey, did you get this? You watched that video on doing this type of equation, and are you understanding it? And how can I better explain it to you, kind of thing?
Yeah, certainly. Anytime where students can get the opportunity to work in smaller groups is always going to be a benefit, because they get more attention. So, and I was homeschooled growing up, so I had a very different educational experience in that I got to pursue a lot of my interests. So if I was interested in writing, then I would take a creative writing class and get to just kind of learn more about that on my own. So certainly, of course, we can't allow students to not take if they don't like math. They have to learn certain things, but giving them the chance to pursue their interests as well is also a way to encourage them.
And it's a way to keep them engaged, and it's a way to keep them from disrupting the class. Mm-hmm.
For sure. And I have a lot of people ask me, how do I get my kid interested in reading? As an ESL teacher, an English teacher, there are some people that they just don't enjoy reading, and that's okay. And I always tell parents that don't try to make them read something specific. When you are saying you have to read this boring book, of course they're not going to be interested. But if they can pick up a graphic novel or a story that's more in their interest level, even if you may think it's too easy for them, you want to just make it an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it was Kate DiCamillo said, reading should be a gift, not a chore.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, what's coming next for you? Are there more middle grade novels coming from you, or more YA titles, or are you going to go in a completely new direction?
So I'm definitely going to keep writing about Talon and Colby and their adventures. I've actually, the first 3 books in this series are coming out this fall. So book 1 is The Land of Fake Believe, which we've been talking about. Book 2 is Once Upon a Climb, and they're also in the amusement parks for this book. And then the 3rd book, they actually go to Neverland and spend the majority of the book in Neverland. And that book is called The Princess and the Key. So there will be probably 2 or 3 more books in this series, but I haven't written those yet, haven't come up with their titles yet. But I so enjoyed writing this book that I just said I can't be done with them. Mm-hmm. I have to keep exploring their world. So I definitely plan to keep writing books in the same genre.
That's really fun. You were mentioning that you teach Spanish and English and work with a lot of English learners. Mm-hmm. Is reading to somebody in either English and Spanish, is that a great way to help them become proficient in a new language?
I always say that it depends on their interests, the same as, doing something in your own language. If you enjoy reading in your native language, then reading in a language that you're learning is a great way to continue increasing your vocabulary. So that was one thing that I did when I was learning Spanish, was I would pick up some of my favorite books in Spanish and learn them and, new vocabulary. But if you don't enjoy reading, then, reading in a foreign language is going to be even less enjoyable. So something like watching TV with captions or something like that would be a way that somebody else could practice their new language.
Interesting. As you were mentioning that, and I'm looking back and remembering the many failures I experienced learning Spanish in high school and just barely getting by. I loved writing stories when I was in high school, and thankfully I had a very wise Spanish teacher for my junior and senior year of high school. He was also my teacher in summer school because I had bombed out. But I think he picked up on this, and he would ask me to write stories in Spanish. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. And of course, you're writing it, and it's like, oh, well, how am I going to say it? Oh, I got to figure out how to conjugate that verb. I have to find out what that vocabulary word is. But it wasn't a chore when I was doing it to write a story. It was fun.
Exactly. Yeah. So in my high school Spanish classes, we read Junie B. Jones in Spanish, because it's a fun, easy book, but it has, some new vocabulary for them and, anything like that where you can incorporate something other than just memorization is a great way to get them learning.
Yeah. Hey, Laurel, this has been a lot of fun. I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about the land of fake believe and find out more about you.
Sure. So my website is laurelsolorzano.com, and I'm always posting new stuff on there with my books, my upcoming releases, and specifically for this book, there's also fun things that children can do. There's a quiz to see which of the characters they're most like. There's a maze, a coloring sheet with the characters. So just some fun things they can get there. And as far as purchasing the book, it's really available for purchase anywhere where you might buy books.
Wonderful. We've had a great, I think that whole which character you most like, that would be a fun thing for a family to do together.
It really is. It has some fun in there, and I've got some evil characters mixed in there too, so you don't know who you might get.
That sounds cool. Well, we've had a really fun time speaking to the author of The Land of Fake Believe, the new middle grade novel from our guest, Laurel Solorzano. Hey, Laurel, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Patty Michelle. She'll be here to celebrate The Antidotes Pollution Solution. This is a great middle grade novel that will give you and your kids an opportunity to talk about the environment, talk about ways that you can come together to protect the planet. We'd love for you to make sure that you join us. Hey, we also would love for you to join us on social media. So many places to connect. Facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram. We have a great Reading with Your Kids page on Pinterest. Of course, our Reading with Your Kids page on YouTube is growing stronger every day. We are also at Reading with Your Kids on TikTok and on Twitter at Jedlie Magic. You can also visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Sign up for our free newsletter. You can also use the contact button at the top of the page to send us a message. Let us know what we're doing right. Let us know what we could be doing better. And let us know who you would like to hear in a future episode of the podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Laurel Solorzano. Please be sure to check out The Land of Fake Believe. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Mirabella Q. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.